Okay, so just to predict what might come up around comparative advantages. So maybe an AO3 analysis question along the lines of explain using comparative advantage how globalization brings significant benefits to both individual economies and the global economy. 6 marks. Using the diagram you would explain it. Or a two-sided evaluation question. Comment on the extent to which globalization will always increase economic efficiency, or comment on the extent to which increasing global trade is beneficial for an economy. So on these two, it would be kind of the side where you're explaining why it is beneficial or it does increase economic efficiency. Those would be the approaches. So one key thing that we're looking at is defining a comparative advantage, which is the lowest relative opportunity cost of production of a good within an economy. This is based on a factor endowment, and if we want to apply it to the case study, then copper would be a key one to look at. It could then be trade with China, so you'd probably want to look at China's other good, and maybe manufactured goods could be the trade between Zambia and China. This allows the division of labour and specialisation to occur into these different industries. What that should create is a surplus which can then be traded. Now, what comparative advantage gives us, because that's pretty much what we would have analysed at AS, is a little bit of extra AO3 to explain why that would happen. So we'd have two economies, and what we would have is China potentially having an advantage in both, Zambia having an advantage in one, and we would have copper on this axis and manufactured goods on this axis. And if we choose a point roughly at the midpoint on both of them, then this is the initial combination of goods and services, and if we look at the extent, we have that amount produced from Zambia, that amount produced from China, and on this axis again, that amount produced from Zambia and that amount produced from China. So roughly we're about here for the production of manufactured goods, and roughly somewhere up here for the production of copper. So currently that is the total global production. Currently of those two goods. So down on that axis, that's almost quantity 1 and that's almost quantity 2. Now, by specialising in copper, what it looks like is we'll roughly get about the same amount of copper overall. However, by China specialising in just manufactured goods, we're going to have more manufactured goods, so there'll definitely be an increase on this axis of manufactured goods, whereas we'll roughly probably stay about the same on this axis. Or China could, if we kind of start somewhere around here, it could still produce a little bit of copper, and then that would take us up here somewhere, and then it would still produce that little bit of extra, so we'd be somewhere over here, which is kind of the combined production of Zambia and China. So kind of China's producing this much and Zambia is producing this much, and the total production of China over here, and then this would be the total global production now. What this means is that's an increase in quantity between those two of about that much of copper and that much of manufactured goods. So this is the link to the surpluses on the graph. So you can either put an A and a B here and refer to that. So the specialization here leads to an increase in total global production. Then these surpluses are traded. So the Zambia trade copper and China trade manufactured goods. And then what should happen is within the domestic markets, the supply of goods will go up. This will bring down the price of goods, which is going to increase allocative efficiency and also standards of living. So we're just explaining how that happens through an increase in total global production on this graph. In terms of why that might not happen, or some evaluation for it, is that it depends a lot upon the terms of trade. So in that example, Zambia were going to have the lower value added goods, and also it's linked back to their primary dependence. And you could evaluate it using the Freiberg-Singer hypothesis, in that there will be a deteriorating terms of trade in the long run, and this is likely to have a significant negative impact on the current account of the balance of payments. So it's likely that it will cause a deficit as higher value imports increase over time, and the lower value or lower priced exports don't improve. So it's likely that this will lead to a worse balance of payments. Another couple of quick evaluation points can be around protectionism, because comparative advantage depends upon free trade, so that there are no market failures in the allocations of resources. So protectionism globally, which there is still lots of examples of, trade between China and Zambia, trade between the EU and Zambia, this distorts advantages. So you may specialize in an advantage that isn't a true advantage. You also have consumer preferences, and if comparative advantages were accurate, then goods would be produced in maybe one country. A good example is the car market, as many countries all around the world produce cars in lots of different variety, and it's linked to and the countries import and export the same product. So relying just on advantages might not lead to higher allocative efficiency, because choice is part of allocative efficiency as well.